it. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Billionaire Brown Experience. I'm Billionaire Brown. Today we have on the other side, Mitch Russo. Mitch, say hello to everyone.
Hey guys, nice to be here. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
All right, there we go. And Mitch is, you'll hear more about resultsbreakthrough.com. So if you want to go check them out right now as you're listening to the podcast, feel free to do that. And Mitch, what we always like to do when we first get started is find out how you got into what you're currently into.
Okay, well, I have a great story to tell you. I think you'll enjoy hearing it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I had a rock band in high school. And the reason I had the rock band is because I was so shy, I could never approach girls. So my logic said, well, you know, if you build a rock band, then actually it'd be probably pretty easy to pick up girls. So I started to, and then I was only 12 years old. I started to practice and learn guitar, and I spent 3 years learning how to play the guitar. And by around 15 years old, I started a rock band. And in that period of time, from 15 to 16, we basically went from the basement of my mom's little house to become the highest grossing high school rock band in the entire area, in the Brooklyn, New York area. So it was very exciting. It was a lot of fun. I met a lot of nice girls and had a ball. But there was a downside to that, and I want to share that with you. The downside was that I became addicted to heroin. And in high school, I was shooting heroin every day, and it was a pretty bad time in life for me. Even though I was having fun in the band, I had lost a lot of weight, and it was starting to show. My folks found out, and they sent me for rehab. And I must say that it looked pretty grim, but it turned out that rehab was one of the most amazing times of my life. I was able to deal with a lot of the issues that you have as a kid and emerge from rehab a strong, healthy adult, even at the age of 18. I was 17 and a half when I finally got out of rehab, and I restarted my life. I went back to high school. I finished and got my degree, and that was the beginning of me being an adult and a responsible adult.
Okay, so a couple questions for you that I wanted to unpack real quick. One is, how addicted were you to heroin?
How addicted? Let's put it this way. I mentioned before I was the highest grossing rock band in Brooklyn. Every penny that we made, and we were making a fortune for kids. We were generating $500 a night back in 1971. So back then I was spending every dollar that came out of that band went right into my arm.
What about your other band members? Were they doing the same thing or no?
Well, most were. I would say half of us were. Two of us together were partners in this stuff. The other two guys had their own issues, but the drummer, Doug, and I were shooting up regularly every day, several times a day sometimes. Okay,
and did you check yourself into rehab, or did someone, were you forced into?
I was kind of forced into it. My mom found my kit in the rafters of the ceiling in my basement, and she brought me home. I was away. She brought me back and rushed me into a New York doctor. And when I went to see that doctor basically told my mother that everything I was about to tell him is a lie. And of course he was right. I was a junkie. So in effect, he would say to me, well, Mitch, are you using drugs now? And I'd say, well, no, I'm not doing that anymore. And he would then tell my mom, see, I told you so. He's a junkie. He's going to lie. Everything comes out of his mouth's a lie. And again, he was right. And so at that moment in time, my mom agreed to admit me on the spot into rehab. And I was kind of forced into it, but I also realized I needed it.
And so did you relapse, or was that just one and done?
Well, it was an 18-month program. I could have left any time, but I knew I could never move back home. My mom would not allow me back in the house until I graduated. So you might say it was one and done. It was also the hardest thing I ever did in my life, even to this day.
Rehab?
Rehab.
Hardest thing you've ever done?
Ever.
What about it was so, what about rehab was so hard?
I had to confront myself. I had to confront the inner demons that brought me to where I was at that time in my life. And I was working with high-level counselors who would take me through these processes that were very, 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 very emotionally draining and difficult. And I had to bare my soul at a level that I had never done before. So for me back then, I mean, I was in basically 3 groups a day. And we were doing an experimental process. It was called primal screaming. It was a primal screaming process. And the doctor who had invented it was Dr. Dan Casriel, and I was at his institute. So we were being pushed, all of us were being pushed every day, really, really hard. And during the day, we were doing, menial jobs, menial work, cleaning baseboards and scrubbing toilets as our daily activities, because their belief was that we couldn't be trusted with anything beyond that. So I dropped out of school in order to be in this program. And when I say it was hard, I mean that it made me grow up, and I went kicking and screaming, but it was difficult. And all I could say is that I was one of the lucky ones. It turns out that I bonded with one of the counselors there. His name was Chester. Chester was a 6'5", huge Norwegian man who had a bodybuilder's build, and he was my closest friend in the program. He was my guide, and I felt like everything I was doing was to impress Chester. And after I graduated, of course, he was very proud of me. And about 6 weeks later, I called up to speak to him, and I found out that he had died. He had gone back to heroin, and he had overdosed. So when I say it was hard, it was, I mean, physically it's hard, but it's, I had to detox too. So that was hard. And the detox period was very short. It was basically about a week. But after that, I mean, I still had all of the demons that junkies have. And, to answer the longer term question that you asked is, I have never gone back to drugs. I have, occasionally have a glass of cheap wine with dinner, but drugs don't appeal to me. I never, ever went back. And to this day, I've been clean and sober. And it's, frankly, let me think now, it's 40, I hate to say it, it's actually 42 years that I'm clean and sober.
Wow, that's awesome. So congratulations to you, and also my condolences to your friend Chester there.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure everybody is probably wondering, whatever happened to Doug? Did Doug continue using, or?
That's a very sad topic for me. Doug and I'll never forget this day. I didn't expect this podcast to go in this direction, so I'm just doing my best here. Doug and I were shooting up under the staircase of his mother's apartment building years early on in the time that we were still using. And Doug turned to me and he said, I had a dream last night, and my dream was that you kicked the habit and you became a super successful guy, and you helped a lot of other people and you made a lot of money, and I died a junkie. And Doug died a junkie.
Wow. Sorry to hear that. Like,
yeah.
At what point, was it early while after you went to rehab?
It was after I went to rehab that, of course, while in rehab, I had no access to phones, or I didn't have any way to communicate with anybody. And it was encouraged that I don't communicate with anybody while in rehab.
Yeah.
So it was after rehab that I discovered that Doug had passed away.
Oh, man. All right. So, man, that's really powerful. Let's switch gears just
Sure.
for a second. Because I know that you're also, the reason why I was asking you, that's the hardest thing that you've ever done is go to rehab, because I know I was reading in your bio that you've worked with individuals like Tony Robbins, which a lot of our listeners are very, very familiar with. Some of us have been to his seminars and his firewalks and his workshops and listen to his audios
Mhm.
and all of that good stuff. So you were also, did we read it correct? You're CEO of Tony Robbins and what he was doing?
Tony Robbins, myself, and Chet Holmes built a company together called Business Breakthroughs International, and I was the CEO and president of that company.
Hmm. So what is, it seems, I mean, Tony Robbins, just on the outside, I've never met him personally, but Tony Robbins seems like a high energy, no nonsense. And like, he's like a Steve Jobs, like where he would, it seems like he would be down and rough on his, you know, his partners.
No, Chet was rough on his partners. Tony was demanding, but he was never rough. Tony is the highest level of gentleman that I can think of. Smartest guy I know as well. Tony was my mentor. Chet was my mentor for 5 years as we worked together. I believe I brought a lot to the table, which is why they chose me to be their partner. But when I interacted with Tony, he was nothing but respectful and always kind, but always demanding. And I appreciated that, and I totally respected that. And I performed at a higher level because I knew that's what he wanted, and that's what he was looking for.
And as a CEO, what was your job? Like, what was your thing that you were responsible for in that whole building, that empire?
As a CEO, I'm responsible for everything. I basically take the buck stops here. So I was responsible for revenue. I was responsible for the productivity of all the marketing. We had 300 people working with us directly or indirectly. I was responsible for setting up all the hiring systems. I created 2 divisions, the recruiting division and the client services division. I structured the sales programs along with Chet, and I managed all millions and millions of dollars worth of radio advertising every year. So I took total responsibility for just about every executive action that took place in that company. And we grew that company 100% a year. We grew it to $25 million in revenue. And then my friend Chet died. And when Chet passed away, Chet died of leukemia.
Sorry to hear that. He died from what?
Leukemia. Leukemia is a cancer of the blood disease. And actually, he died of a complication related to leukemia. And when he died, I realized that chapter was now closing in my life. And it was a time for me, and I spoke to Tony extensively about this, and he agreed that it was time for me at this point to move on, and I did. And that's when I wrote my book, The Invisible Organization.
Okay, so I want to talk about the book also, but I know some of us, including myself, are thinking, how did you went from a junkie to that the dichotomy between a junkie and working with Tony Robbins is like huge. How did you know them?
Yeah, well, I mean, let me take you through a little bit more granular detail of the process. So after I graduated at Rehab, which was the name of the rehab center that I went to, I went out and I got a job. And, I was counseled at the time that you only need 3 things to be successful in life. You need a job, you need a girlfriend, which means you need to know how to have a human relationship with the opposite sex, and you need a place to live and a way to sustain yourself. So I worked very hard to get those 3 things. And when I did, I wasn't happy. And I started asking questions like, is that all there is? Because honestly, drugs was better. I mean, this is kind of boring, actually. I can't drink. I can't get high. Yeah, I got a girlfriend. Yeah, she's nice and I like her. Yeah, I got a shitty car and a crappy apartment. And this is what life is supposed to be. And I mean, it wasn't enough. And I went searching. And that began my spiritual path. And that is how, over many years, I really started to find myself outside of the outside physical world, which led me to much of the things that I've studied and learned. In fact, it led me to study Tony's materials. And
Okay.
over that period of time, I was working. As I got more experience, as I got older, And I got educated. I became an electrical engineer. I went to college and I became an electrical engineer. And I started working as an electrical engineer. And I realized, as much as I loved electronics, I hated the bureaucracy of being an engineer. All I wanted to do was design circuits. And all they made me do was run down parts lists and stupid build lists and all kinds of crap. And I didn't want to do that. So I said, as I watched all of the people in my industry getting rich as salespeople, I said, that's what I want to be. So I transitioned into sales. And I joined a sales company for a 50 to 60% cut in compensation. And it took me 14 months to get to the point where I was making where I was before. But I didn't care. I was doing what I loved. I loved to sell. And then as I sold and as I generated more and more cash and I started saving money, I then realized that my true dream was to start my own company. And so I did. And I started Timeslips Corporation, which became the #1 software company in the world for time billing accounting software for lawyers. Now you might say, Mitch, lawyers are pretty boring. I said, yeah, they are. But let me tell you something. If you get on their good side and you produce a product they like, they're very loyal. And they were. And they made my company #1. And I grew that company to 100 people. And then I grew those sales to over $10 million. And then I sold the company. So now I am 40 years old, and I just sold my company, and I now have to move to Dallas, Texas to help the new owners manage it, get it set up, and earn it out. So I had to earn out my money, which I did. But while I was there, I only had to stay 2 years. They said, Mitch, why don't you run our company too? I said, okay, I guess so. Dallas is better than Boston in the winter, so let's give that a try. And I stayed for 2 more years, and I became the chief operating officer of Sage US. Sage was the company that bought us. And in that period of time, I mean, when I were building Timeslips, I met Chet. Now, Chet was a salesman. Chet called on me to try and sell me advertising. And that's when we became friends. And so after I sold the company, Chet and I remained friends. We talked every week. We debated the mysteries of life, if you will, as we both were on our own spiritual journeys. And that he invited me to come and help him. And so I did. And I came to help him, and we built a recruiting division. I built a recruiting division for him. And at that point, he offered me a position as president of the company, and I took it. And as soon as I became president, we began negotiating with this guy who I only had listened to his tapes, which was Tony Robbins. So every Thursday night, we get on the phone with Tony, Chet, myself, and Tony, and occasionally a lawyer, and we hammer out a deal to build a company together. And we did that. That's what became Business Breakthroughs International. And that's how I got there.
So do you have a wild story or a crazy story about working with Tony Robbins?
You know, I got to tell you, I don't know if I could call it wild. I think what happens is that when you work in the presence of a true master, the amount that you learn accelerates very, very quickly. So I'm at this age, and the type of clients that I bring in right now, I mean, people don't pay me by the hour. They pay me for my wisdom. And I had the luck and of course the gratitude to be able to work with Tony one-on-one for hours upon hours, days upon days, to help create our company. And so all I could say is that the longer I got to know him, the more amazed I was at what an incredible individual he was. And the more I learned, the more I absorbed. Tony taught me things I would have never had access to before. So I don't know if I would call them crazy stories. We had a lot of fun together. Tony had generously invited me to all of his events, and I went to as many as I could. He invited me to his island in Fiji, and never got a chance to go to the island though. But I guess I don't have crazy stories. I just have stories of experiences with him.
Okay, so do you remember the day that you realized, like, whoa, this guy is pretty impactful?
Well,
Like an aha moment. I think Oprah Winfrey likes to call it an aha moment, one of those type of deals.
I'll tell you one story about the first time we met.
Okay.
Now I'd been a customer of Tony's and had bought many of his training programs in the past. And I remember a difficult time in my life when I was going through a divorce and I had to take a business trip. I had to drive from Boston to, what was it? I think it was Albany. And it was going to be a long drive. So I took my box of Tony Robbins CDs and I threw them in the car. And I started listening to CD after CD, one after the other. And I had these very emotional moments where I'm basically screaming at the windshield because that's what you're supposed to do as part of the training. And I ended up after that trip, it was a cathartic experience. I mean, emotionally, it was draining, but it brought me to a new place just having listened to those CDs. And here I am now standing next to this incredible individual who has guided me throughout my life through his materials. Now, Tony, as you know, is a big guy. I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'6" on a good day.
How tall is he?
He's at least 6'8".
Okay.
I'm possibly taller, but I think he's 6'8". So here I am standing next to him, and if he puts his arm around me, it's like I'm about up to his mid waist. So I kind of look like his midget standing next to him. But here we are. We're in the lobby. We just launched our new product, new event. It's called the Ultimate Business Mastery Summit. And I'll never forget this because I'm standing there, Chet, Tony, and myself, and we're talking about strategy, about how things are going, about the sessions and which session to have next, when all of a sudden, someone comes around the corner and sees Tony Robbins and says, excuse me, Tony, I just have to tell you, I love you. I want to thank you for all of the wonderful materials you produced. You've changed my life. And Tony, of course, is very gracious and says, thank you. And the guy goes away. So we go back to chatting. And then all of a sudden, someone else turns around the corner and says, oh my goodness, is that you, Chet Holmes? And Chet says, yes, it's me. And he says, Chet, I just want to tell you how much you've changed my business. We followed your materials. We studied your work. And, you know, my revenue is up 40% just on working with your materials. And of course, Chet said, thank you very much. And this guy left. I had that realization at that moment that what I basically was in the middle of was the heart and the head of the most dynamic business trio that I could ever be involved in. And so it was my job to be there. And that's when I had that aha moment. I had that aha moment that I'm now standing with two of the most amazing individuals in the world. And the gift that I've been given to be the CEO of their company was not lost on me. And I took that inspiration, that time, to do everything I could to grow that company. And with my partners, that's exactly what we did.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Mitch Russo, the author of Amazon's bestseller, The Invisible Organization, which we're going to get to in just a second. But from time to time, Mitch, this last question in regards to Tony is we have some of us believe, like, wasn't there a story of how he wasn't supposed to be that tall?
Well, Tony had and I don't know if I have this exactly right. Tony had an imbalance in his, I think it was his pituitary gland, and it caused him to grow faster and bigger than other kids. And it wasn't until they discovered this and were able to medically correct it that they realized that it was a problem. So Tony's size was the result of some form of either an illness or a condition that, if untreated, potentially could have killed him.
What age was that? When he was really young, or was that when he's an adult?
I think it was when he was really young.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay,
so we have this Amazon bestseller, The Invisible Organization. And we also know that the project that's, by the time you guys hear this, it'll be resultsbreakthrough.com. So again, make your way over to resultsbreakthrough.com. We'll also make sure that it's in the show notes. However, I do want to talk just a little bit, because it's not every day, or it's not every episode that we have an Amazon's bestseller on our show. So what is the Invisible Organization all about?
The Invisible Organization is a book that I wrote just after I left Business Breakthroughs with Chet and Tony. The book basically is designed to help CEOs take their existing company and convert it to a virtual company. So the tagline is how ingenious CEOs are creating thriving virtual companies. So the reason that this book was written is because people needed a way to understand how to move from being a physical entity to being a partial virtual or completely virtual organization. Now, the benefits of doing that there's just so many benefits to doing that. One of the benefits, of course, is expense. You're able to shed enormous amounts of overhead. And this is done regularly these days by airlines. For example, I don't know if you ever realized it, but if you called for a reservation to Southwest or JetBlue, then understanding that everybody you speak to on the phone is working from home. So they understood this. They were able to create this workforce that didn't burn gasoline every day, that didn't spend hours in the car commuting, that didn't require them to get dressed up to go to work. And instead, they let everybody work from home from their home computers. They put a VPN, which is a box called a virtual private network, inside their house. So it's about a $200 or $300 box. And that creates a private channel back to the company servers. And now anybody could work from home without any fear of their data being corrupted or anybody spying on them because of that VPN. And now companies understood that you don't need a building with 700 people on the phone to take these calls. And as I said, you also don't need a building, but you also don't need the expense of a building, the real estate taxes, the insurance, the electricity, the heat, the air conditioning, the telephones, the chairs, the modules, the elevators, and everything else. And you don't need a parking lot. And everybody who gets to work from home is grateful. Why? Because they just saved 2 hours of their life. They just saved the expense of a second car. Stanford University did a study, does working from home work. It's a 2014 study. And in that study, it shows categorically proven that there's a 13% increase in productivity of people who work from home. And sick days are eliminated. The rate of people quitting and taking other jobs is almost declines to zero at that point, because people love being able to work from home. So the book was written to help people to guide that process so that they could take their company and create a virtual organization.
Is this large large organizations, small, mid-size?
It's any. I profile one company in the book that had a small architect business nearby where I live, 14 people. They saved like $41,000 a month by going partially virtual. That's for a little company, $41,000 of after-tax dollars is a pretty good savings.
Yeah, that is. So who amongst us, so you're basically saying if you have any type of business, if you're an entrepreneur, you probably need to read this book, and you need to read it for the fact that your business is probably going to expand. And when it does expand, you may want to get rid of those headaches. Employees. And is that pretty accurate, or?
Well, I don't advocate getting rid of all your employees. I think there's a place and time.
Send them home.
Yeah, send them home. And there are going to be some times when you can't. Listen, if you're a dentist, you can't work from home. If you have a restaurant, you can't run it from your house. But your bookkeeper can work from home. Your advertising people can work from home. In other words, in every company, there may be an aspect that is required to have a physical presence. Mm-hmm. But there's also a big component of that can be sent home. I also profile a meatpacking company in New York City. Their company was expanding and they were running out of space. So instead of trying to move, which you can imagine is a very difficult operation, they simply moved all of their administrative people and all their salespeople and all their marketing people home. Now they ended up with 20% more space to expand in without having to change facilities. So it's basically once you figure out what you can move home and you do, then that frees up a lot of cash, but it also gives you something else. It kind of gives you a superpower because now as a virtual organization, you have superpowers that other companies don't have. You could do things that other companies can't do easily. And I basically blueprint all that entire process in the book.
So the company that you were just speaking about that you helped save $41,000 a month, what are they like? We're wondering like, okay, so how did they save 41,000? Is that the mortgage, the rent, the lights, the phone bill? Like what is that 41,000?
Okay, so it turns out, let's see, we had rent, electricity, gas, leased servers, custodial, coffee service, snacks, phone lease, internet, phone service, properties and facility insurance. That turned out to be about $17,000 a month right there. It's all in the book, by the way. And they moved that expense down from 17,000 to 5,000. So that right there was 12,000. And then it turns out that they didn't need 3 people. They didn't need people to man the phones. They didn't need people to do some of the other things that a physical presence required. So they let them go.
Wow, I actually really, really like this. And this book, for those wondering, this came out in 2015. But it's almost kind of like a prophecy because so many people are working from home right now.
Yep.
And I believe probably a large portion of them, the CEOs, the decision makers, probably got their hands on this book, especially if it's breaking it down because it only makes sense. In most cases, you're not trying to get rid of the employees. You're just saying, hey, send them home. It cuts down on a lot of your costs that are really unnecessary. You could put that money into something that's more profitable to help build your business.
Right.
Was there did you have a testimony or do you have somebody who took advantage of this? But I know you just mentioned the 41,000, maybe it's them, but was there anyone who really gave you that stamp of approval that you said, wow, I'm super glad that I wrote this book?
Well, I mean, I don't know if the name Jay Abraham rings a bell. Does that ring a bell to you?
I've heard, yeah, it sounds familiar. Yeah.
He's one of the preeminent business gurus of our time. He actually wrote the foreword for my book. And so
Nice.
Jay's stamp of approval, I mean, again, I don't need to, but I could read this to you. I mean, his stamp of approval of the book itself was all the endorsement I needed, but that wasn't all the endorsement I got. Have you ever heard of the show Shark Tank?
Of course. Just watched it the other night.
Good. So Kevin Harrington, who's a guest, who was a season, for 3 seasons, he was one of the sharks. Kevin wrote an endorsement for the book as well. Have you ever heard of Charles Schwab, the investment company?
Absolutely.
The CEO of Charles Schwab, Mark Thompson, wrote an endorsement of this as well. Have you ever heard of Lucent Technologies, a division of Bell Labs?
Absolutely.
Okay, the CEO of Lucent Technologies, Rick Miller, wrote an endorsement for this book as well. I could kind of go on and on. If you go on to Amazon, there's, I don't know, several dozen 5-star reviews. I mean,
how does that make you feel? I mean, do you look, because your life is very crazy. Well, I won't say, well, with all due respect, it's crazy. You go from a junkie to the Tony Robbins, you lose a lot of important people in your life.
Yes.
Right? Lost a lot of important people in your life. And now you're helping companies, not even just yourself, because the book is, how much is the book? Book is less than, let's say, $30. And you're helping people save $41,000 a month. Do you ever look back on your life, like how big of a deal was this becoming an Amazon bestseller? How big of a deal was it to hear all these CEOs finding so much value in your book and they're changing the course and the direction of their business?
I mean, it's a question that is, I mean, hard to answer and easy to answer at the same time. It feels amazing. I mean, it feels great. It feels like I've been endorsed. It feels like I have been acknowledged by others. And, you know, there's still a little bit of that doubt that we all have, and I have it too sometimes. You know, am I doing the right thing? And the other question I ask myself a lot is, am I helping enough people? And that's where I look first. So my first line of vision always starts with who can I help and how can I help them? And I could help one person or two people, but how do I help 100 people or 1,000 people or possibly even 10,000 people? How do I do that? And so that's the way I structure the way I think about my life these days.
Okay, so you from time to time ask yourself, are you helping enough people?
Yes.
Okay, so all right, you have the Invisible Organization book, but is that leading to the fact that you didn't feel that, or you feel like there's more people you can actually bring value to, there's more people you can help? Is that why we have this resultsbreakthrough.com?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what is the resultsbreakthrough.com giving to the people that the Invisible Organization didn't?
Okay. So clearly you remember my story about what I experienced in high school as a drug addict.
Of course. And how you joined the band because you couldn't get any girls and you thought that would be a nice way to get some. Yes.
Okay. Well, you know what? I was a troubled teen. I was a very troubled teen. And I was basically, I came from a broken home. I mean, like many of us. And I had the realization about a year ago that I think I have a way of helping other troubled teens get out of that situation. But then I said, well, you know what? I have a way to help entrepreneurs as well get their lives together and become successful. And so I'll tell you a little bit about how the whole idea came to me and how this whole thing started. One of the biggest problems that we all have as entrepreneurs, particularly if we're not running big, successful businesses, is that we are always searching for something great. We're always searching for the thing that will ignite our passion or capture our abilities and allow us to channel our skills in the right direction. And these days, what we're presented with a lot of training programs and courses. We see these launches all the time that you can get $15,000 worth of bonuses if you buy now, and it's only $2,000 or $199 a month for the rest of your life, and all this kind of stuff. And people like me back then, I would buy these programs. I'm embarrassed to say how many I bought, but I bought a lot. And I'd buy these programs and I'd have a lot of hope and a lot of dreams about what I'm going to do once I complete the program and have the skills that I paid for, but I don't complete it. And I get a little lost and I get a little busy and I get a little bit distracted. So I searched in my inventory of experience and I had remembered that the times in my life I was the most successful is when I had an accountability partner, someone who I could talk to every week, who could keep me focused and keep me accountable. So I started to look for an accountability partner, and I actually couldn't find one at first because I kind of knew who I knew. I mean, I didn't know people I didn't know. I mean, I just knew who I knew. And eventually I did tap into someone and said, look, why don't we do this for each other? I think it will help us both be more successful. So we did. It turns out that she's an amazing accountability partner. But then I realized that a lot of people could use this idea too. So I started looking for ways for other people to find accountability partners, and there were none that I liked. So I decided to invent my own. And I hired an interface designer out of London, and I hired a development team out of India, and I built the specification, and I created a software platform, as I said earlier, is like Match.com for entrepreneurs. So not only do you get to match up with somebody who, just like you, wants to complete a training program or grow their business or grow their life or stay on a diet or stick to their exercise program, whatever it is you want out of your life, you can accomplish it with the help of another. So there's a great story that I use in my webinar about a man who's about to die and go to heaven. So he stops into the local church and speaks to the pastor and says, I got to know, what is it like in heaven? And he says, well, you know, I got to tell you, in my mind, and the way I visioned it is that if you died and you went to hell, you'd enter this big room filled with a banquet of food, but people laying around and starving, because the only way to eat the food is if you use chopsticks. And the man said, well, what's wrong with using chopsticks to eat the food? He says, because the chopsticks are 10 feet long. He said, but then when I went to heaven, I saw the same banquet of food, but everyone is happy and there's music and people are well fed and enjoying all that beautiful food. So he said, well, what's the difference between heaven and hell? And he said, well, in heaven, we feed each other. And to me, that was a beautiful story that illustrated what I have decided to create, a place where we can feed each other, a place where we could help each other to succeed. So my system is designed to structure one-on-one live phone calls so that you stay within the guardrails of the specified goals and objectives that you set for yourself. Now, here's the part that I haven't gotten to yet. Everybody who signs up to the resultsbreakthrough.com system gets a chance, if they want to click a little box on their profile that says, I want to be a 10-minute mentor. Now, what is a 10-minute mentor? A 10-minute mentor is, if you volunteer, we will set you up to have a one-on-one conversation with a inner city high school kid, and you could choose to do it once a month for 10 to 20 minutes a month. And that one meeting once a month could save a life. And so my belief and my goal is that if I could facilitate 100 of these meetings a month, 1,000 of these meetings a month, maybe I could prevent somebody from going through what I did, the trials and tribulations, if you will, of drug addiction. Now, I was lucky. I lived to grow up and become a successful person, but I'm an anomaly. I am not like others. And a lot of people who go through this don't live and don't grow up and die. And I figured if I could find a way to help just a few more of these people, then it would all be worth it. And that's why I created the Results Breakthrough Network.
Man, that's really good. It's like, so let me just get, just for clarity, how Match.com, I've never used it, but I understand the concept of it. How specific does Results Breakthrough go? Like, let's say if I'm a school teacher, right? Am I able to connect with another, like, is it going to help me find another school teacher?
Sure. Yep.
So it's vision-based.
I mean, it's profession-based, it is interest-based. I mean, you could find people specifying almost anything you want.
That's brilliant.
We have a list inside the software that will, I mean, and the list, by the way, the list grows every day, of all the different professions and business types that we have or offer. We also have another section of the software so that, let's say that you created a training program, and let's say that you wanted to offer accountability along with your training program. And you said, Mitch, can you work with me to create, your system for my program? And I would say, sure, give me the top questions that you would want to guide people with over the course of the time that they're taking your program. And I would just take your list and I would drop it right into the resultsbreakthrough.com system. And you would be able to sign people up and they would be able to click on your name or on your program and have all of their guidance preset. So every week when they go into their accountability session, you, as the owner of the course or program, has basically set up exactly how they need to go through this to become successful.
Is this your proudest creation?
So far, yes. Well, my true proudest creation is my daughter, but yes.
Okay, because I'm thinking the invisible organization, that it kind of, in a sense, it's for a specific market.
Yep.
But with this resultsbreakthrough.com, I mean, I see anybody from the culture to the arts to, like we was talking about, teachers, to everybody needs some type of accountability.
Yep.
And then when you add on, so I think that's more open to everybody should at least take a shot at it.
I totally agree with you. And for like, if you wanted to sign up, I mean, it's like long-term, it's like $30 a month or something. It's really cheap, but the benefits are priceless.
Oh yeah. What's the difference between mentorship and coaching?
Well, to me, coaching is something that you purchase to accelerate something that you're doing that you want to do faster or better. So if I want, like, I'll give you an example. When I learned to become an options trader, I had the knowledge, I studied the books, and I knew how to trade options. But it wasn't until I hired a coach from the Chicago Board of Options Exchange that coached me and accelerated my ability to get experience that I really became good at it. See, that's the difference. Alone, I would have stumbled along. I mean, I had knowledge, but I didn't have experience. So I was able to pay some money and get a lot of experience on my side very quick. Mentorship is more like guidance. And mentorship is when you, and by the way, you can get mentorship from books. I mean, I could, in a sense, say that, a person that I could never, think of approaching could be my mentor if I studied their books. I mean, a good example would be Zig Ziglar. I mean, Zig Ziglar is someone whose work I've studied. Brian Tracy is someone whose work I've studied. Basically, they've been my mentors for years. I never met them. They don't know that. Well, Zig is dead, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, mentorship is a guidance at a higher level, wisdom-based guidance at a higher level, and coaching is an acceleration of skills acquisition. That's how I think about it.
I love it. And as we're winding down, I'm also, the selfish question is, a lot of our audience, are you familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Okay. So a lot of our listeners do follow and, the words of Gary Vaynerchuk, the motivation, the inspiration. And he has this big, he sparked up this big conversation about work ethic and working, being obsessed with what you do and mastering your craft. Do you work a lot is the first part of the question. And the punchline to the question is, how important is work ethic no matter what you're doing to you, in your opinion?
This is a great conversation because there's been controversy over this issue with books like The 4-Hour Workweek.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
So you see, my personality is such, as you probably can realize, I have an addictive personality.
An addict can't do half of nothing.
That's right. So when it comes to business, I get addicted. I get passionate. I'll use a different word. I get passionate about ideas. So when it comes to building the business, when it comes to being just in this process of building the resultsbreakthrough.com system, I have been working between 14 and 16 hours a day. And my wife would say to me, how could you do this? How could you sit in front of that computer and work all these hours every single day? And what I said to her is, honey, it's not hard. It's easy. I love it. Excuse me, but I want to answer some more emails. Could I talk to you later? I mean, but there'll be a period of time. The other thing that you don't know about me is I'm also an award-winning landscape photographer. So there'll be times when I will just drop out of life for weeks at a time and show up in Thailand or Bangkok or Bhutan or Italy or France or anywhere and photograph the landscape for 2 weeks without anybody bothering me by cell phone or email or anything else. So I think there's periods of life when you need to be passionate, but you also need those downtimes and you need to stay connected to others. Now, my wife knows that I love her and that I'm here for her, but she also knows that she needs to get out of my way so I can get this done.
So I guess you basically answered, what's your thought on work-life balance? Is work-life balance real or not?
I mean, I don't know. I can't, I think that's an individual personal question. I mean, for me, I live in Boston right now and it's miserable out and the weather sucks. And I could look out the window on a good day and see a gray sky. On a bad day, I could be stuck in a 30 to 60 mile an hour wind blizzard. So for me, there's no true work-life balance in the sense that I'm working. In the summer, I'm out playing. And yes, I still work, but I'm enjoying my environment and I'm enjoying the weather. And I go on bicycle rides. And for the last 3 years, we've had a motorhome. So we go out in our motorhome. We don't have that anymore. But I'm just saying that to me I balanced my life based on the conditions of my life at the time.
Okay. And you're from Boston?
I'm from New York City.
Ooh, that's
Brooklyn, New York.
Oh yeah, Brooklyn, New York. So how long you been in Boston?
A long time. I've been in Boston since 1975 and then For 4 years, I lived in Dallas, Texas, but then I came back here to the Boston area.
Are you into sports or no?
No, I'm not into sports.
Okay. I mean, this has been really, really helpful. I know everybody got a great deal of value. Do you have any final thoughts or any final message that you would like to leave us with?
Yeah, I do. I say this to people who ask me for advice, and particularly for those folks who are struggling themselves right now. And I think that the definition of failure is when you quit. And if you call yourself a failure, then it means that you quit something. And what I'm saying instead is before you quit, try a pivot first, because you might be going in one direction and you may not be succeeding. But if you give up, that's when you fail. But if you pivot, you get a chance to try something a little bit differently, a little bit newer. Maybe you just need to try what you're doing in a different market. Maybe you need to alter what you're doing in this market to make it work better. But if you quit, you failed. And that's the advice I give people. So don't quit. Stay focused. And obviously, I'm going to say this now. I know it sounds a little trite, but get an accountability partner. Let someone help you stay focused. And that's what works the best.
Yeah, resultsbreakthrough.com. I know I'm going to also be checking it out. We're avid readers, Mitch, and it sounds like you're well-versed. You mentioned like the Zig Ziglars and Brian Tracy's. We already know we need to pick up The Invisible Organization, but what are some books that you could recommend for us that we should be reading?
Okay, so the books that I want to recommend, the first book I want to talk about is a book about mindset, because I think that a lot of us struggle with mindset and getting our mindset right. And so the first book I'm going to recommend is a book called You Too Can Be Prosperous. Now, this book was written in the 1950s, I believe. And I have read this book 7 times. But I will tell you this, if you're just going to read the book, don't even bother buying it. You have to read the book and do the exercises in the book. The exercises are a little bit cathartic. You will need to really dig deep to do these exercises. But what the book is designed to do is to shift your mindset in a very big way. And if you follow the ideas in the book and if you believe in a higher power and you believe that the universe conspires to help you when you're in that place where you need that help, then this is a book that's going to basically accelerate your whole life. And I really love the book a lot. So that would be one of my recommendations. Now, in terms of other types of books, I mean, there's a gazillion books that you could buy. There's a gazillion books out there about business. It really, to me, means, the topic that you want to study. So when it comes to sales, I like a guy named Jeffrey Gitomer. Do you know who Jeffrey Gitomer is?
Not off top, no.
Okay, you know who Grant Cardone is?
Of course.
Okay, so Grant and Jeffrey both teach selling, and they have several books on sales and closing techniques. I like Jeffrey because he's more raw. He's blunter, and he's
Grant Cardone, really?
Yeah. I think he's more genuine. Grant is basically a very wealthy man, and he's made a lot of money in real estate and a lot of money in educating salespeople. But Gitomer is all about the money and all about the selling. And so for me, I love that. I love the fact that he is there and he's sharing his wisdom. And it's like a live laboratory, because every day he learns something. Every day he shares something, and every day it makes a difference. And I think the people who follow him in his life. So follow Jeffrey Gitomer. Take a look at some of the things he's done. They're really great. On the topic of health, there is a book called that I love, by the way. The name of the book is I'm drawing a blank right now. Stephen. Why am I drawing a blank? I'm sorry. The book is all about health. It's basically called Grain Brain by David Perlmutter. So this is called The Surprising Truth About Wheat and Carbs. And I live my life in a place where I am very careful about my diet. So if you get a hold of Grain Brain, I think you'll enjoy the book. If you're careful about carbs, this is a great book to study as well.
Okay, excellent. We appreciate that so much. And also, you're on social media, Mitch?
I am. I also have a podcast called Your First 1,000 Clients.
Oh,
and
nice.
I would love for you to come and take a listen and give me your feeling about the podcast as well. If you like the show, subscribe and rate us. That would be great.
Your First 1,000 Clients?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And that's a podcast. Where are you streaming on? Or where's it playing?
I'm streaming off of all available platforms, and you can go to yourfirst1000clients.com.
Okay, excellent. And where do we find you on social media?
MitchRusso.com.
Everywhere, across the
Everywhere, MitchRusso.com.
All right, excellent. All right, well, thank you so much, Mitch, for spending time here with us. Again, this is the author of The Invisible Organization. Go connect with resultsbreakthrough.com. See what that is all about. Connect, 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 connect. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the Billionaire Brown Experience. Until next time, continue to be.
Bad credit affects where you live, what you drive, and even your current or next job. With so many frustrating issues that happen in life, we can help you find relief. Text 480-358-7725 today. Not only will we fix your credit, but we will educate you so you can educate your family. Now back to your favorite podcast.